Welcome everyone to the Special Projects Grant Panel Review Meeting for Panel B this June 20th at 10 a.m. I would like to take a minute here to introduce Jessica Jenkins, the Executive Director of MCACD, and she'll begin with a few remarks here to open our meeting.
Thank you, Rachel. So on behalf of the MCACD Board of Trustees, I am pleased to be joining you all this morning to provide a brief overview of the 2024 Special Project Grants Program. As many of you may know, the Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District proudly partners with our friends at CultureWorks to administer the Special Projects Grant opportunity. And so through the Special Projects Grant Program, Montgomery County nonprofit organizations, schools, colleges, universities, and jurisdictions and government agencies can request up to $10,000 in funding for the arts and cultural projects that take place between July 1st of 2024 and June 30th of 2025. And so the Special Projects Grant Program, through support from the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners, this year has made available up to $250,000 for the grant cycle. The program is one of 4 grant-making initiatives under the MCACD's work. And so I want to just, again, thank CultureWorks and today's panel for their participation in the process. We are so grateful for the collaborative partnership, the impactful investments, and deep commitment to cultivating the arts and cultural fabric of our community to make Montgomery County a vibrant place in which to live, work, and play. Thanks so much.
And I am going to jump in here. My name is Lisa Hanson. I'm the president and CEO of CultureWorks, and we are so very grateful to Montgomery County and Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District for their vision and valuing the arts enough to invest in it. So we could not be sitting here today without that investment, that revenue to support the arts in our community. And thank you to Jessica Jenkins for your work in helping to make that happen. I would also like to thank all of the people that have dedicated time and energy and their expertise to making this a valuable process. It takes so much time to review all of the applications and provide thoughtful and meaningful feedback. We are so grateful to each and every one of you. And I'd like to call out Rachel Evans Nead, who has jumped into this process. She is our new director of grant making, and she began in April and has done such a great job. But it is, in keeping with Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District and CultureWorks' commitment to transparency. I just want to say that we do bring together each cycle an independent panel of artists, arts administrators, and community leaders that evaluate all of these applications and make the funding recommendations. So that is what you are here, and thank you for joining us. You are here to witness today is a live presentation of their review. And so it's my honor right now to introduce today's panelists. Panelists, when I call your name, if you could just give a wave so that everybody knows who you are. And we are so grateful for your time and energy today. First, we have Ed Dixon. And of course, it's pretty obvious because you're right by your gallery there. But Ed is the founder of the Edward A. Dixon Gallery in downtown Dayton. Ariel Walker. Ariel is the Strategic Implementation Director at the Dayton Art Institute. Jean Love. She is the Senior Proposal Specialist at Saudi, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Solution Services, a women-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned businesses support organization. And Katie Markey, Education and Development Manager for the Dublin Arts Council. Again, thanks to each of you for joining us today. We're looking forward to your commentary. And now I'd like to introduce to you Sean Yu. He is the president and CEO of Discover Classical, and we are thrilled to have him chair the panels this year. Thank you, Sean, for your work and your time commitment. And now I will hand off the baton to you.
Thank you, Lisa, and good morning, panelists and to guests joining us for today's meeting. Today's panel is gathered here to discuss applications in education, visual arts, and capacity building project categories. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide these panelists with an opportunity to hear each other's perspectives and for organizations to hear specific feedback about your respective applications. Attendees, please keep in mind today's discussions will move quickly, but know that panelists have conducted a thorough review and initial scoring of applications over the last several weeks. To ensure that there is sufficient time to discuss all applications, panelists will not be addressing all areas of each application in their comments. Instead, they will be focusing on the primary strengths and areas for improvement within each application. Applicants and other audience members may only observe the meeting and will not be permitted to interact with the panelists or provide any additional information during the review process. And prior to the panel meeting, all panelists were asked to identify any conflicts of interest with applicant organizations. And panelists do not score or discuss applications from organizations with which they have a conflict, but no conflicts of interest among today's panel and today's applications. I'm going to give you just a brief overview of how the meeting will take place. The panel will discuss 15 applications today in education, visual art, and capacity building project categories. Applications will be discussed one at a time for up to 10 minutes each. At the beginning of each discussion, panelists who have declared a conflict of interest would be temporarily removed from the meeting, but I will then call upon the primary reviewer, who will then begin the discussion by presenting the application's major strengths and also areas for improvement. Once the primary reviewer has concluded their remarks, I'll then open the floor for other panelists to add comments and for any discussion. There will be 5 short breaks during the public session, each beginning on the hour. Panelists may use these breaks to adjust their scores if needed and to make any additional notes. Once the panel has discussed all 15 applications, audience members will be asked to leave so that panelists can finalize their notes and scores. Panelists will also review the applicant rankings from highest average score to lowest and make their funding recommendations. Panelists can choose to award applicants the full amount they requested or award partial funding. In 2024, as has been mentioned, a total of $250,000 is available through the Special Projects Grant Program. This funding has been divided between today's panel, Special Projects Panel B, and Tuesday's panel, Special Projects Panel A, which discuss projects in the cultural, multi-arts, and literary and performing arts project categories. The portion of funding each panel has available to award is determined by the total amount of funding requested by each panel's respective applicant pool. This year, we will not reopen the virtual meeting to the public to allow applicants to see the panel's funding recommendations. Instead, you will receive that information via email by a week from today. That email will notify applicants of whether or not the panel has recommended them for funding. The grant panel's funding recommendations are subject to final review and approval by the Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District Board. By early July, applicants will receive notification of their final funding status by email. CultureWorks staff will then schedule a meeting with each organization selected for funding to review and complete a grant agreement. Today's meeting is being recorded, and a recording of the discussions will be available at cultureworks.org within the next week. And with that, panelists, anything before we get started? Let's get right into it then. The first application up for review is the Miami Valley Symphony Orchestra, and the lead reviewer on that application, Ed Dixon. Take it away.
Thanks, Sean. And thanks again for asking me to be a reviewer this year. It's great to kind of help with the arts community and hopefully help move it forward, reviewing these applications. So it's quite a bit of work, but it is still enjoyable to be part of the process. So Miami Valley Symphony Orchestra, they're requesting $10,000 for their Building the Future project. I'll just read their one sentence project summary that says, as we move into a new era under the musical leadership of Awad Dagan, messing his name up, Prat, we will build and implement new strategic plans, enhance our marketing presence, and update our infrastructure in order to complement the arts community and organizations within the Montgomery County and raise shared cultural economic vibrancy in general. So this is a capacity building application specifically. So this application is more towards building the capacity of the organization itself, not just the individual project, but so that they can produce better and more quality projects. So to that end, what they stated is that they'll be implementing strategies, tools, and innovative programming to extend its reach to the next level of engagement with the communities that it serves. So a big part of their application revolves around the appointment of their two new conductors, one principal and associate, one I just mentioned, and then the associate conductor, James Johnston. So that's again a big part of their application. What their application, I would say, kind of revolves around. So they have three different sub goals that they're using in their capacity building, and which are innovation in programming, enhance internet and social media presence, and community reach. So their funding is primarily to work in those three areas, and that'll be going to consultant fees, both for their main programming and their youth programming, and again, kind of revolving around getting the word out and producing new programming with these new conductors. So some of my notes in the main areas, I'll just go through some strengths and weaknesses, first starting with the quality and artistic vibrancy. So I said a lot of the description, just one of the notes, a lot of the description of the project and its three sub-projects I thought fell into the implementation section. So just to improve the application and looking at that, I think those descriptions could have went into the actual description section, where more of it could have been, the detail could have been there instead of in the implementation section. But everything was still pretty clear and I understood it. Just that little small change though would have helped the application a bit. And just with the agile information as well, the project, they're gonna use the agile method to describe, or well, rather to implement the project. And again, that was more put into the description section, which I think could have been put into the implementation section. Just a little something to, I need a little glass of water, just a little something to help the application flow a little better. But the information itself was very detailed and well laid out. So, and again, as I mentioned, the overall project seems to build on the center around the excitement and enthusiasm around the new conductor and the associate conductor. This can help all the sub-projects reach their goals by providing enthusiasm for the planned events, fresh content for the enhanced internet presence, and also assist with the outreach. The personnel involved in the second sub-goal of enhancing the internet presence is still TBD. Would have been good to have had that prior, but the planned RFQ is a good way to bring in that talent. The other personnel listed for the other activities, their qualifications are listed and very adequate or better for this project. The capacity building around the new conductor and the push to enhance the youth orchestra makes this a high quality and vibrant project. When it comes to community impact and engagement, the impact section didn't necessarily address the impact the three sub projects would have specifically. But again, there was a lot of mention about the new conductor and his qualifications, his presence, and his willingness to aid in the outreach. That will be very impactful. The feedback that came from the community regarding raising public awareness was helpful as well. The provided document showing an internal survey looks like it gathers important information. Identifying the marketing experts for the new vendor solution prior to application would lend to the strength of the personnel involved in the project. Examples of external audience, other stakeholder surveys would give more clarification in that direction as well. Future ideas were laid out in the evaluation section for meetings with the community, and evaluation tools to gauge those activities would be helpful as well. Also, and this is pretty much, I think, standard with most applications, that a clearly stated timeline would be helpful. And when I say clearly, I just mean something that's kind of more listed out. The summary way that it was done, laid out everything that was going to happen. But when you have a timeline that kind of shows dates and actions in more of a listed view, helps the reviewer easily see when things are happening and what's happening. Qualifications of the lead personnel are more than sufficient to manage the project. So, and then my overall comments, the project seeks to enhance three main aspects of the organization with the addition of new principal and associate conductors. The additions alone help make this an impactful and artistically vibrant project. Its three sub-goals are important areas to improve and enhance the capacity of the organization. There can be some areas in the project to reevaluate and improve, such as the activities related to the inclusion and evaluation. But overall, the project has competent, talented personnel involved that can make this project successful in its goals. And that was my ending comments.
Okay, I'd like to open up the floor for any additional comments from the other panelists, please. Ariel, you look like you unmuted.
I did. Ed did a really fantastic job. That was really thorough. The one thing that I noted that I really thought was a great kind of callback in the application was they noted how a previous MCACD grant helped them to identify their new conductor. And so really being able to tie that back to having successfully implemented and used this funding prior and how they'll use it moving forward, I think, at least for me, helps build confidence in the applicant that they are able to utilize these funds in a way that really addresses an issue and then allows them to move forward to building capacity in the next space. So I just wanted to point that out. I thought that was a really strong callback from a previous application that gave me confidence in their ability to execute this project.
Katie.
Yes, I second Ed and Ariel, your thoughts. In particular, I enjoyed the comments about the youth orchestra component and how it seemed these topics at hand, the activities and mission of this project, directly enhance expanding accessibility to that audience. So I appreciated that section in particular.
Jean?
One of the notes that I put goes along with what Ed had mentioned, is that there were, to me, it felt like there were still a lot of unknowns. Like Ed mentioned, they didn't know who the consultant was. They hadn't identified that person, even though they have a process in place to do that. I also made a note that the evaluation tools and criteria hadn't been clearly identified on how they're going to measure the success of this implementation capacity building project. So if I miss something, please point that out to me. And then my other concern, and maybe this comment is getting a little bit too into the weeds with this, but they mentioned they wanted to implement a new ticketing system. And because the Miami Valley Symphony Orchestra uses a lot of different venues for their performances, I just wasn't sure how that would work for them. This new ticketing system. Again, maybe that's too far in the weeds, but I didn't know if they were going to work with those venues. What happens if people want to buy tickets at the venue the day of? What happens if they've lost them? All of those things. As a regular attender of the arts, those are questions that came up when I read that.
Okay. It is 10:21 and we do want to keep on schedule, but if anybody has any last comments that they feel a particular need to share, by all means. Okay, take just a moment to jot down any notes and adjust your scores as need be. And while you do that, we'll move on to our next application from the Dayton Celebration Chorus. Ariel Walker is our lead reviewer. Ariel.
Good morning. Thank you. So the Dayton Celebration Chorus is also applying for a capacity building grant. The goal of their grant is really rebuilding membership post-COVID. They spoke a lot about losing members of their chorus in performance spaces, and that being very difficult to with a smaller chorus, and having lost some of their partner sites, really trying to rebuild some of those relationships. The applicant specifically identified reaching diverse communities with their work, and they have aspirational goals of having a population that's reflective of both Dayton and Montgomery County. With regards to the quality of the project, the application provided a clear timeline for the 24-25 season, and within that specifically identified the summer season from July to August of this year for the grant funds. Their proposal includes 2 performances during this time, both with a focus on driving diverse communities to their performances and diverse community members to joining their organization. While it's clear that the Dayton Celebration Chorus uses its performances as their primary recruitment tool, the application never quite explained how the 2 proposed performances would be approached differently from the rest of the season to help them increase their capacity. So a little bit of additional information drawing a very straight line between how those 2 summer performances would be marketed differently, would be recruited for differently, would have been really helpful in strengthening the application. The community impacts was also not entirely clear in the application. While I felt like I could really draw some of my own conclusions about how a diverse community chorus would benefit the region, it's not very clear in the application what that impact would be. The Dayton Celebration Chorus has partnered with the University of Dayton as their fiscal agent for the project, and the Office of Special Programs and Continuing Education is supportive of the project. Based on the information provided, it seems that the identified staff would have the ability and capacity to complete and manage the project on time. My last real comment would be that I found the budget to be a little bit confusing as well. At the top of the application, the project budget was listed at $6,000 and the organizational budget at $10,000, but the submitted budget documents were up for $11,600. So I had a hard time sort of understanding where the $6,000 of the requested budget would be spent and how that would directly impact the recruitment efforts of the organization. So both clarification in the narrative and then making sure the budget documents really line up in all 3 of the budget places would really strengthen the application. Overall, it sounds like it's going to be a really exciting 24-25 season, and I look forward to how this organization continues to build their membership. And I would be excited to hear what the rest of my panelists thought about the application.
Floor is open.
Yeah, I just kind of echoing one of the points that Ariel made that, and one of the notes that I had, it just said the project could use more direct activities to increase membership, such as the question in the survey about joining. But I do appreciate that the members have history that shows that performances themselves can lead to member interest. So just again, yeah, just more direct activities, or at least, explaining what those activities were that happened at the shows or wherever that may be, to draw those people in once you do have that performance and you have those interested parties.
I had two notes myself. One for project quality. I appreciated this idea of a shorter summer season. Seemed to be a nice mechanism to give new audiences a taste of their programming without being overwhelmed. And then I also second, Ariel, your comment about the marketing aspect. Just wondering if there could be more of an opportunity to talk specifically about how you would market these two separate programs. And if you are working with a fiscal agent, perhaps there could have been some more information about kind of tapping into that partnership, any of those resources that could be used from the university side to increase marketing and community engagement associated with these projects.
Back to Ed's comment about the survey and, trying to recruit people from that. They had a question, and I understand that it's just a sample survey, but, they had a question, yes, I'm interested, but didn't have any space for somebody to put their contact information for how to reach them if they're interested. I also made a comment that it's unclear about how reaching out to downtown churches will increase the group's diversity. I can assume what that means, but I'm not sure that it wasn't clear. We'll just put it that way. I think those are all the specific comments that I had for that one.
Other thoughts from the panel? That being the case, I will give you all just a moment of time. I've got 10:28, so you actually have about a minute and a half or so to go ahead and take down any notes and adjust your scores accordingly. And we will pick things up with our next application in about 90 seconds. Okay, we're now up to our next application, which comes to us from Musica, and Jean Love is our lead reviewer. Take it away, Jean.
Thank you. This is my first opportunity to participate in a special grants panel review. I am happy to be here, and I'm hoping that my input will contribute to the continued success of the arts in the Montgomery County, because I am a lover and patron of those arts. So we're going to review now the capacity building grant from Musica, which is Dayton's chamber choir. and it's the only one of its type in this area. They are asking for $10,000 for two specific areas of growth. One is for their website, to build out their website. The other one is to work with a musical archivist to rearrange their music library. They had to move their operations in, during COVID, and by reorganizing their music library would help them not to spend additional funds on buying music that they already have. Their other project implementation step is their four concerts that they want to hold this year. One in October, one in December, and one in May. And so because it's a all volunteer organization, the only people that get paid are their music director and their accompanist, and they only get paid per session. Their capacity building for part one is their concert season. Again, they want to increase their visibility and their reach and their capacity to sing a wider variety of music, which kind of goes into part two of reorganizing their library. One of the weaknesses that I found was under project evaluation, and it says if the website does all we desire it to do, it will be a success. To me, that kind of sounds like an all or nothing. If it doesn't meet their goals, it won't be successful. And they didn't really make any other comments about that. They were pretty detailed in their use of funds, how they're going to use it in their budget, and how they would adapt if they didn't receive their entire funding. And their accessibility and inclusion seem to be on point. They're going to have a free concert in Huber Heights, and then their other concerts will be in various areas around the community, and their venues will be accessible for everybody. I don't think that I had any other comments. Let me look really quickly at that. I did not have any other comments, so.
Okay, let's open the floor up. Other comments, items for discussion.
My comments. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay,
Ed, you go first.
I'll go. Just those two positions, which were pretty important. I didn't see, unless I missed it. I just thought it would be helpful to know more about how the web consultant and musical librarian archivist, who they would be or how they would be chosen, since those were two pretty key elements of the application.
My comments were very similar to Jean's, but one of the things that as when I'm reading a grant application, there's a little bit of talk about the evaluation section. When you're reading the flow of an application and you get to the evaluation section, and to Jean's comment where it just says If the website does all we desire to do, it's a success. That kind of brought the whole thing to a screeching halt for me. And so it really became a distraction that I focused on. I think there's a lot of ways that you can measure the success of a website. You can measure web traffic, you can measure increased interactions. All of that works on the back end of a website. You could tie it to social media. There's a lot of ways to do that. But the way it was approached in this application really highlighted that part's not really figured out yet. So I would encourage the organization to really think about how you will measure that component of this, because it's a really big part of the ask of the application. And so that to me was a place where it really could have used a little more focus to draw me in as I'm reading the application and really understand what this investment will do for the organization.
I agree. I mirror my comments as well. I think that the description is very detailed. I appreciated the supporting documentation as well, but for evaluation, it's hard to, if there's not a full plan in place, it's hard to talk about impact and directly kind of pull the qualitative and quantitative impacts. And I know they mentioned utilizing comment cards and getting some of the testimonials, which is positive, but some more of that quantitative feedback or evaluation component and that data mining would have been helpful to make it an even stronger application. And then I had a similar comment about the consultants as well, just feeling just more description, overall description about that would have made it a stronger narrative.
Jean, anything to add to the discussion?
No, those are, thank you for those additional comments about the lack of the information about the consultants for the website. And I had it in my notes and I didn't pull it out. So thank you.
An opportunity for any final comments before we move on. Okay, go ahead. Take a moment, panelists, to jot down any notes or adjust your scores. And we will pick things up with our next application here in 75 seconds. All right, continuing on with this session, we now come up to our fourth application for review today. WYSO, Katie Mark is our lead reviewer. Take it away, Katie.
Sure. Thank you for having me, and good morning, everyone. So this is WYSO, which is an independent community-owned public radio station. They are proposing a project titled Music Skills Focus at a request of $10,000 in funding. This program, Music Culture Focus, will be a series of workshops and collaborative sessions for community members and local freelancers, in which WYSO staff will facilitate free arts training to registered participants. This is also in connection to their new satellite location that is in the Dayton arcade. So when reviewing this application, I noticed that because it's proposing programming to take place in this new satellite campus, I felt that the community impact would be strong. I appreciated the project's desire to connect both professional artists with participants, and kind of offering this innovative incubator, if you will, for artists. I also appreciated how the application, it described how it would address equity gaps and trying to make the application process for the registered people who would be involved with this training sessions, trying to make it a mix of residents. So being mindful of those participants and where they live, their social economic status, and making these training sessions free, which I thought was strong. I did feel that the timeline was descriptive. So for these sessions, they're kind of going by season, spring, summer, fall, and thinking about what session will be offered in its itinerary or curriculum. So assigning descriptions on who will run these courses, what the session will involve. And the first session, it will end with a live performance showcase, which I thought was a nice, strong culmination to share with other community members on the radio station. I felt that the application was going to be led by the professional staff for this radio station, and they had clear descriptions, I felt, about their background and their training, and feeling that they've facilitated similar things like this before. They also described for their promotion and marketing that they do have pre-established networks with local high schools and colleges to send out communications. So I felt that along with social media advertising, and as well as on the air and on their website, felt that the project would have, a ripple effect and would be able to have broad reaching out into the community. And then lastly, I felt that their budget seemed clear and concise. That's what I had for my primary review.
You open up the floor for discussion, panelists.
I thought this was a pretty thorough application. One of the just notes that I had that haven't come up yet was that a lot of while Chris and Juliet's background was very clear and identifying how they would oversee the project, in a lot of places it just kind of said, there would be a supporting staff person or supporting volunteer or supporting DJ, but those specific people were not necessarily identified. And I totally get that the project may not be that far along the line. But as a reader, I assume we'll get there, but it would have been strengthened if there were specific contracts in place or identified individuals already engaged in the process. That would have been a little stronger for me. They did in a couple of places, but that was just one of the places that I thought, a really good application could have been just a tiny bit stronger.
So I'm going to preface this comment with, I am not a numbers person. But to me, the budget seemed confusing because they have their entire budget of $16,885 listed under the special projects grant. Now, if you look at their supporting documents, it's built out a little bit differently so that it's a little bit clearer, but still not clear on how they, for me, again, not a math person, the numbers didn't all match up to me in all of the different areas. So for me, it was a little bit unclear.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comment. I see where you're coming from, Jean, on that supporting attachment. Having the notes field, I think, was helpful to try to parse out kind of these different sections of personnel, outside fees, marketing, production. And there were a few I mean, I read this to be somewhat clear, but I do think maybe there were sections of expenses that I could see going nesting into different sections, maybe, which is maybe what we're also seeing on that broader budget.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, though, I believe, um, yeah, it was just the in-kind revenue that made the difference. So the 10,000 was all um, cash from the grant, but it went to 16,885 because 6,885 of that was considered in kind. So yeah, just kind of move things to a different column. It would be clearer kind of thing.
Any additional comments? Anything else? Any final thoughts? Okay. Go ahead and take a few moments to jot down any notes and adjust your scores accordingly. If we want to synchronize our watches, I have 10:47. We will have the final application for this particular session of today at 10:50. So go ahead and take a moment. Everyone, moving right along. Our final application for this particular portion of the day comes to us from Class Act Drama. Ed Dixon is our lead reviewer. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay. Here. Okay, so Class Act Drama. It's a theatrical organization for home educated students, grades 7 through 12. They're requesting $10,000 in order to defray the cost of royalties, rent projection, and sound equipment, and set expenses for fiscal year 2024 through 2025 in the performance of its next production. So they do Broadway music. They choose a Broadway musical each year that the students perform. And they usually draw from students that are homeschooled, even though they enter. did specify that students who can still maintain the schedule, any student that can maintain their rehearsal schedule is welcome to join. They do some specific things to kind of help with inclusion, like having private auditions and working with special needs students, and even doing some of their promoting to senior centers and assisted living facilities. Here. Most of their funding will go to or is specified for technology expenses such as the sound system, and then the other large portion going to securing the rights to perform the actual production, so getting the licensing and all those kind of things. And now this is something that they've done many years. So they have some history with doing this, and they have quite a bit of support from staff and alumni, and then of course from the students. So reading through some more of my notes, stage production plan uses well-known material. It can provide a quality experience. No resumes were provided, but there was an extensive list of the volunteers and their titles, roles, and history with prior productions. Class Act Drama provides an artistic production to the community while providing the participants with a multi-level approach to education and growth. A sample of the online survey mentioned in the application would be helpful. Also, CAD uses accessible venues and is active in making participation and viewing of the show accessible to people of all abilities. They use a multi-pronged approach to promotion, including print TV and other theater programs. And again, as I mentioned, this is a project that has been completed other times in the past and builds upon that history. The budget is clear, and it is explained that it is primarily focused on technology and licensing. CAD's board and alumni are very involved in the show's production. It's an annual Broadway style production. My final comments were it's an annual Broadway style production performed by students and is an asset and benefit to the community. The organizational support is impressive, and the process itself can provide a lot of benefit to the students involved. That's all I have for that.
Thank you, Ed. Comments, Ariel, are you unmuted for a reason?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty strong application. The couple places that I noted that could have used a little bit of additional information, I would have found it really helpful if they had really talked through some of the previous shows or the shows that they're planning in the future. I didn't get quite enough of that in the application. I feel like I would have better understood, the scope of the types of productions that are being put on. And the other place where the application speaks to their volunteer staff, while it noted the positions that the individuals have in the organization, it never really discussed their qualifications other than that they are a parent or an alumni. So it would have been really helpful to know, if their treasurer has a background in bookkeeping or something like that, that would have really would have supported that all of the right people are in the right seats for the organization. I'm sure that they all have significant skills that make this all work together, but I didn't get that information from the application itself. So that would have really strengthened it for me.
I had a few comments myself. Yes, so I felt that as Ariel mentioned, just some more robust descriptions about the artistic administrators and instructors. Again, I'm sure it's a very high quality group. Just some more information would have been helpful. I was also curious about the students served too. So as education being my background, I'm curious about just the more kind of broader description about how many students, their ages, where do they live, kind of their backgrounds. And then I was curious, and perhaps I just missed this, if students pay to participate. I wasn't quite sure, and I didn't find that in the application. So addressing that question could have been helpful for me. And then lastly, I'm also curious about how they select their theater productions. So just wondering if, how the community is involved, and I'm sure these decisions are made with multiple voices across the board. But again, just more curious, I think, with some of these points of information that are probably really strong for this organization that I think could have just been written more clearly or in more detail, that would have helped me as a person who doesn't live in the area. I'm not a Dayton Metro person. I live here closer to Columbus. So having that information embedded into the narrative would have helped me as an outside viewer. But overall, I think it is a strong ask and request. And I feel that the organization has created a lot of impact over its 10+ years of experience in the community. Those are my comments.
It looks like in the budget, they have a line item for income through memberships. So although that's not really clearly explained, I think I assumed that was memberships of the participants because it's in the income line item. But I agree, it's not explained in a way that I felt like I totally understood where all of the income for the organization comes from.
That's good to note, though. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you open up the supporting documents, the budget supporting documents, it has member audition fees at $700 for under revenue, sorry. Member joining fees at $700 and member dues at $4,600. Now, again, it's not clear what it looks like they're paying to join and paying to audition and paying to continue their membership in this program.
Okay.
Is what I'm getting from it.
I see that now. That's helpful.
One of the other comments that I made is while they talked a lot about qualitative measures of success, there wasn't any quantitative. It was all very, in my opinion, it was all very subjective on how they were going to measure the success of their program. Again, focused on education and how engaged and how much, are the students becoming more engaged over time, their work ethic. Are they coming to their rehearsals, et cetera, et cetera? And maybe you could turn that into some quantitative numbers over the years. That might help for measuring. And my other comment was it wasn't clear how the grant would be used because the project summary states that it would be used for royalties, renting equipment, and set expenses. But then the budget lists that the entire grant is going to equipment rental and that royalties would be covered by other funds. So, which it sounds like they have a plan, but perhaps they changed that plan from when they started writing to when they finished up with their budget.
Any final comments? All right, everyone. We are now straight up at 11 o'clock, up to our first break. So panelists, I invite you at this time, if you want to stop your video, mute, reminder, do not leave the room, please. And we will pick things back up here in 10 minutes. Thank you all.
Welcome back, everyone.
We are at 11:10. And welcome back, everybody, to the second portion of today's meeting. And to all of our guests joining us today, welcome. To lead us off, our next application comes to us from the YWCA Dayton. Our lead reader is Ariel Walker. Ariel, floor is yours.
Thank you. The YWCA is proposing a partnership with We Care Arts to support their Dayton Children's Program. The request is for $8,820. The program offers supportive services for youth staying in the YW shelter, their transitional housing, and their rapid rehousing facilities. They're proposing monthly on-site arts programming for children along with their caregiver. The application presents a variety of quality projects that will occur for up to 15 participants over the course of a year. Each of the sessions is approximately 90 minutes, and the proposal outlines examples like watercolor trees and a Halloween project that will be implemented across this time period. The project also includes up to 10 additional art kits for residents that are not able to attend the classes. And I thought that was a really great adaptable solution, especially because the application talked about some of the uncertainty facing some of the children and their families. So being able to be flexible in how they present and allow for participation in the program, I thought was really great. The application clearly defines the impact of this program and the impact on the community, specifically the community they represent. There's a consistent focus on self-esteem and emotional resilience through art, and that's a really powerful section of the application. The evaluation tool that was attached was specific to residents in their shelter spaces. So although it shows that the applicant uses surveys in their work, it would have been great to see how they would measure the specific program. And the application would have been a little bit stronger if they had tied the community impact to the evaluation tool. But the application also identifies a really strong team to manage this project, both from the YW and from We Care Arts. The budget was very clear. They broke down every section of how they'll implement the program and the budget that goes along with that. And they were very clear in how the funds that they could receive from this grant will be directly tied to the services they're providing. The application was very detailed, and based on the application, I'm confident that the program can be implemented based on the information that was provided. And overall, I thought this was a really, really strong application, and I would be interested in what my other panelists thought.
Floor is open for comments.
Yeah, I agree with everything Ariel said, and just I had a small comment on the budget and the breakout budget. I think it would be helpful for all these budgets to be done in a more spreadsheet type format to easily follow, even though they didn't have a lot of other categories to input into, but still to easily follow what money is going to the grant, coming from the grant, where the income is coming from. So I don't think on their budget it had an income line. So just putting it in that format so everything is more clear for all the readers.
Those are great comments.
I'm sorry, Katie. I'm going to intercede just a minute to comment on that, Ed, because that's actually helpful for me to hear too, as far as what we can provide applicants, as far as how to format the budget. So thank you for that comment.
Yes, that's a great comment. I second Ariel and Ed, your comments too, just about I felt that this application narrative was extremely clear, well written, very descriptive. So as an outside viewer, again, not as a resident in this area, I felt that I understood exactly the objectives and the mission and the breakdown of the programming itself. The partnership with We Care Arts, I think, will ensure the project quality and that arts learning enrichment. I feel that the other aspect is just having a clear description of the target audience. So having a description of knowing who this programming will serve, and then being able from that point to ascertain clearly what impact, do you anticipate gaining from this programming. So that connection felt very clear to me as well. So overall, I felt confident in this applicant, and felt that I really understood the parts and pieces of the narrative and of the programming.
I have no other additional comments beyond what has already been talked about.
Okay, if there are no other comments, I'll give the panel a few minutes to jot down any notes and adjust their scores. We will resume with our next application here in 3.5 minutes. Okay, we are now up to our next application, which comes to us from City of Kettering and the Rosewood Arts Center. Jean Love is our lead reviewer. Go ahead, Jean.
Thank you, Sean. So the City of Kettering Rosewood Arts Center is requesting $9,924 for a new project titled Printmaking for All, which was a series of educational and artistic programs and events created to expose new audiences to printmaking in the greater Dayton region. The City of Kettering is going to establish a print club for teenagers and community members. They will also include a series of lectures and demonstrations, studio tours, and hands-on activities. A print exchange with local high school students at Stiver School for the Arts, Fairmont High School, and the Dayton Regional STEM School. A print exhibition at Rosewood Arts Center, and a Print Nook activity station at the Wilmington Stroop branch of the Dayton Metro Library in the Rosewood lobby. And then the last one is a premiere of a special film on the theme of printmaking. I thought that their application was very solid. They gave us good, not necessarily resumes, but biographies of the participants that will be leading these workshops and activities. They gave us a timeline for when they want to implement these things. They gave us some project evaluation goals. Their accessibility and inclusion was strong. How they're going to get the information out, I thought was solid. And their use of funds was detailed. But one thing that I did notice, again, not a math person, so that kind of stands out to me, is initially they asked for $9,924, but if you go to their application under use of funds, it says $9,087. It then down to the budget says $8,687. And if you go to the supporting documentation, that says $9,087. So just kind of all over the board with those numbers. So that was not clear exactly what changed between the time they filled it out and the time they submitted it. That was the only really thing that stuck out to me as a weakness, but I would be very much open to hearing the other panelists' thoughts on that.
Overall, I also thought this was a really strong application. I echo a lot of the things that were already said. The one thing that I thought was really strong is in their evaluation tool, there were questions specific to measuring the learning growth of the individuals who participated. And I wanted to just highlight that this application, it was not a long evaluation tool, but it provided both the qualitative and the quantitative, yes, no answers, but then also fill in the blank, and also included questions about measured growth within individuals. So I wanted to highlight that as one of my other additional comments when I was reading the application.
Ed, you were.
Oh, yeah, I was just kind of echoing what she had said about the budget, and because that did stand out to me. And I did just notice that between the budget on the application and then the supporting document, the budget breakout, there was just differences between the film and the material supply numbers that created that difference in numbers for some reason. But then again, why it didn't match to the top level initial request, that's a whole different question. But anyway, just something I'm sure could be easily addressed. But then I just wanted to add, though, that I did appreciate that the application had the letters of commitment and the letters of support from the commitment from the artists and letters of support. So I thought that was good to have as well.
Overall, I felt that this was a strong application. It had me excited. I was reading it and really enticed by the educational programming that it had to offer. So from just a program quality and community impact statement, I felt that it had a real kind of full life cycle, if you will. So I liked that it started out by having print clubs associated for different target audiences within the community, thinking about studio tours and hand-on activities kind of to energize people to come visit the space, get a taste of what it has to offer, and showcase and kind of get them excited to want to participate. And then kind of continuing on that spirit with an exchange program. And then finally, that culminating aspect of an exhibition. It felt like it was really strong from a quality and from an education standpoint from start to finish. I feel that the applicants are taking on a lot of this programming, and it's a hefty, robust kind of schedule of events. But I feel confident that the professionals involved within the project will fulfill the mission and will do it at a high standard. Yeah, I think just overall, just again, it felt like a strong narrative and a strong education impact that it could have.
I'm gonna interject one more time. It's just I have some correspondence with the applicant on record about the budget stuff. So I think, we can discuss that if that becomes relevant during our closed session after this. Yeah.
Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, we'll give you all a moment to take any notes, and we will resume here in 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. I'm enjoying this panel. I feel like it's a lot of good, close reading, and as a former literature professor, it is very fun to listen to, so thank you.
Can I ask a quick question, Rachel? Do any of the applicants receive guidance or training on the budget document within the application? Because, to Ed's comments on the last application, they're sort of across the board. It seems like there might be a misunderstanding of how to fill out that
how to
form.
use it. Yes, and I agree with you. And those questions were coming at me within my first few weeks of employment. And it was a surprise job, by the way, as well. So yes, that form is something that Karen designed and that I've talked to her about. And I do know that I'm going to revisit revising it, just based not just on feedback from the applicants as they were going through the process and trying to help them with the form while I was still learning the form was a thing, but also just listening to your all's comments about the form as well, as far as even the form is not necessarily working the way. And I think that was part of your point, so it's definitely going to be something that I revisit for next year. So I do thank you for asking that question too, because I do want to make sure that the form itself is not undermining the application, right? Yeah. Because it did definitely cause some confusion for some applicants, and I just wasn't in a strong position yet to be able to provide the help everybody needed.
Okay, moving right along, we now come up to the application from the Dayton Printmakers Initiative. Katie Mark is our lead reviewer. Go ahead, Katie.
All right, so this is a special projects application from the Dayton Printmaker Cooperative, which is an alliance of printmakers and artists fostering and preserving the arts of printmaking, founded in 1983. So the application is requesting funding for a printmaking workshop series, which will begin this year and will finish up midway through 2025. They are requesting $10,000 for this new project. The project itself will include a workshop series where participants can expect to learn printmaking techniques from beginning to end through demos and step-by-step instruction. As I mentioned, the workshops themselves will start up in July of this year and will continue until early June of 2025. The group noted that they are very familiar with hosting summer workshops pre-pandemic. So this was a familiar education initiative for them to take on for this year and part of next. And that their committed roster of workshop instructors includes emerging artists, professional artists, and educators. Overall, I appreciated just the strong mission and objectives of this application. I enjoyed that artistic spirit of camaraderie and partnership to be shared. It's kind of that incubator thought again. I felt that the program was designed to inspire and empower artists at all levels. So the idea here is that the workshops would engage both professional printmakers as well as newbies or beginners. And I felt that that was reflected in their curriculum for the workshops. I appreciated this application's strength when it came to the detail of the logistics. So I felt that it was very clearly called out the trajectory and the timeline for the programming. So they had every month established when they would offer a workshop and then an assigned instructor for that workshop, as well as the type of workshop that they plan to offer. I thought the planning skills were strong on that point. Another strong area to comment on was this DPC grant committee. So from their members, they formed a committee that is in charge of planning for this project as well as the application. And with that, the grant narrative went into detail about those coordinators or managers and the members themselves and how the members will be assigned to help put forward this programming. So I thought that was very clearly laid out. Another strong point was their marketing and website section. So they have committees responsible for marketing this initiative, as well as a website designer already secured to place this information on the digital outlets, as well as their evaluation. So I thought that was strong as well. They had in their attachment section, they had an evaluation that they will offer to both the instructors to, for that feedback on that side of things, as well as the participants, and then their committee and members at large. Lots of strong language. I felt like their narrative was really strong. They had clear program impact goals and objectives. And so tying that again back to their evaluation plan, to me, seemed pretty strong. And then lastly, their budget was extremely detailed. So they had, of course, the budget that was on the application, and then they had an attached Word document, which was very, very lengthy. They had money set aside for their 12 instructors. They had assistants for each instructor. And then, of course, a lot of material costs, which they've already listed out. So I felt like it was a fully baked plan, very descriptive. Feels like the planning is already underway, which makes sense as it is late June and this would potentially start happening in July. So I had confidence that that planning aspect was already really well created. Those were my overall comments.
Thank you, Katie. Floor is open for discussion.
I can go. The one thing that I wanted to also highlight is in their accessibility and inclusion section, they identified printmaking as being difficult for people with differing abilities. And so I thought it was really really strong for them to identify that they recognize that as a limitation of the practice they're putting forward. But then identified a number of ways that they really work hard to make sure that anybody who wants to participate can participate. And so I really appreciated that short section of the application. But I think when applications identify a place where they know they have some sort of difficulty or shortcoming, addressing that and then really saying like, here's everything we're doing to make sure that we can kind of combat that as a limitation. So I wanted to highlight that as something that I thought was really strong in the application.
Other thoughts and comments?
Yeah, I didn't have anything to add onto what's already been said. So
You all will probably know me as the budget person when we get done with this, because kind of going back to what Ed said about a previous application, I really appreciated that they were so detailed in their supporting documents, you know, even to these are the items that we need for this particular workshop, and this is how much it's going to cost. It would have been a much easier read if it would have been put in a spreadsheet form. And again, they didn't match. So, but I'm sure that can be fleshed out somewhere.
It truly is the way that form is set up, that it does some addition for them that is not always recognized. And so you wind up getting the numbers being skewed. So truly that's what is happening a lot of times, I think, with these budgets. Yeah.
Katie, did you have
Hey.
something to add?
Just one lasting thought. I did appreciate their supplemental information about the history of the organization itself. So showcasing photographs of the space, the equipment, and then, you know, over the 40 years they've been an organization, just the history to see it grow and the programming that they've done over those past decades. So just from a context standpoint, I thought that was a really strong supplemental information to include.
Any last thoughts or comments? Okay, go ahead, panelists, take a moment of time to jot down any notes and make any changes. It's 11:38. You have about 90 seconds before we move on to our next. Okay, up to our next application, which comes to us from the Mosaic Institute of Greater Dayton, and Ed Dixon is our lead reviewer. Ed, floor is yours.
Right. Yeah. So again, from the Mosaic Institute of Greater Dayton, they have a project entitled Healing Arts Mosaic. Um, their one sentence project summary is to create a permanent public art mosaic with adults in recovery as a means of healing and contribution to the Twin Towers neighborhood. So they are partnering with the East End Community Services to work with uh, their participants in their programs and partner with them to create this program of creating these mosaics. So, and let me switch screens here. Um, all right. So my starting comments were that the project provides a nice artistic project for those in recovery and a new piece of public art to beautify the community. As I didn't mention, the final piece would go into the sidewalk, public sidewalk there. Um, the CV provided by the project manager has relevant qualifications. There's other members listed that have their title and role. No specific qualifications there were provided. There was a little, I guess maybe error with how the CV was listed because it was listed where maybe the sample, one of the samples were supposed to go. But again, it was in two parts, and again, a pretty extensive resume for the project lead. The project serves a need for the participants and produces a benefit in the form of a piece of public art and possibly the healing of members of the community. The access to participate is limited, but the access to the final artwork is accessible to all. There is an evaluation plan in place with real-time monitoring of the project. A sample of the survey would benefit the application. The promotional plan or maybe the implementation plan can benefit from more detail as it relates to the public approval and unveiling of the artwork. Of course, because being something that goes into the sidewalks, you know you're going to have public comments and approval as part of that process. So just a little bit more information on kind of how exactly how and when that would happen, and even again, like I said, a public unveiling would benefit the application. Explain how that would happen. The project has provided experience. The project manager has provided experience with several mosaic projects. The budget is comprised mostly of hourly cost of design, creation, and installation of the mosaic. Other personnel involved have titles and roles listed, but other qualifications not listed. The overall project has lots of merit and can be a real benefit to the participants and the community with the use of art. Of course, art being um, a healing uh, type activity in the areas that could use more clarification are the public approval and additional personnel qualifications. Overall, I found this a project that could produce some artistic vibrancy for the community, as well as go a long way to help those that are directly involved in creating the artwork. And those were mine.
Thanks, Ed. I also noted the strength of the partnership for this application. It's clear to me that they have all of the right people in place to have this project be implemented successfully. Ed mentioned this, but the evaluation section, although in the application narrative, it sort of addresses that there will be a survey, but then there's no survey attached. So it's really hard to evaluate whether their measures and metrics for this program would be sufficient to know whether it was successful or not, because it's not clear in the application. It addresses a survey, but again, without any survey being attached, there's no way to know what the quality of that measurement tool would be. So just double check your application attachments to make sure the right things get uploaded in the right place.
I agree with that statement, Ariel, for sure, on the survey component part. I did think it was strong and under the accessibility and inclusion section, where they are acknowledging that it's a very diverse neighborhood that speaks over 20 languages. So that being aware of accessibility and that could be a barrier for participation. And so offering volunteers to assist with that engagement process, I felt like was strong. And then secondly, offering activity opportunities at that East End Community Center, which is accessible, again, would make for strong participation. So I felt that those sections were strong. And then the survey, as I mentioned, that could have strengthened the narrative for next time.
So help me with some clarification here. Did it say, so they're going to install the mosaic in the sidewalk, but they're going to build it at a different site, create it at a different site, correct? And I read that the Mosaic Institute's moving to the Twin Towers neighborhood in July. So I guess I'm just confused about the comment that they made about being in Twin Towers and having all of these diverse, 20 languages, which was mind-blowing to me. But the participants are going to be from the East End Community Services program, not the Twin Towers. Is that right? Or did I miss something?
Twin Towers is the neighborhood in which
Right.
and community services is. So my inference was that their draw at the site is from that, excuse me, that neighborhood. But maybe I misunderstood that as well.
That was my understanding or inference that, yeah.
Okay, so they're working with the East End Community Services Center, but the participants will most likely come from Twin Towers neighborhood.
So I read it to be that I want to get their name right. The Mosaic Institute of Greater Dayton had partnered with East End Community Services Center site to implement a project at that site with their participants, which are primarily from the Twin Towers neighborhood.
Okay.
And I could be completely wrong, but that's how I read it.
Yeah,
okay.
That's my inference. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any last thoughts, comments? Okay, we are right on time. It's 11:48. Go ahead and take a minute or so to jot down any notes, panelists, and adjust any scores. Okay, and we're down to our final application for this particular portion of today's panel meeting. GEM Project Dayton, and Ariel Walker is our lead reviewer. Ariel, take it away.
Thank you, Sean. GEM Project Dayton is requesting $10,000 to support their art contest for suicide prevention. The 2024-2025 year will be their 4th year of completing this project, and it will launch on October 11th, which is World Mental Health Awareness Day. The application identifies a clear timeline for the project, and starting on that date and then ending in February with the award ceremony. So I appreciated how clearly they outlined their process. The application also, the quality of work is seen in both the participation in the project, but also in how many partners they have in doing this work. The judges for the contest represent both youth and adult representatives, and I think that the anonymous process they use is outlined in a way that makes it seem that it's pretty efficient and effective for their program. And the timing of it, I thought, was also really well thought out, with applications being open through January, which allows their students to have the winter holiday break to complete their submissions in a meaningful way where they have time to really commit to it. The application is detailed and focused very much on the students who participate and the impact that the suicide prevention work they're doing has on the community. The GEM project clearly shows how working with schools and other organizations to create a peer-to-peer network and how that's really effective in the work that they are doing. The award ceremony is open to the community and offers additional suicide prevention information and resources in addition to just announcing the winners. I liked how they talked about the format with students being able to have their artwork projected behind them as they're being given their award. I also really liked how the artwork is used beyond the contest itself. They talk about using it in their Jumpstart Conversations presentations, and then also in some sort of like printed materials. And I think that's just a great way to continue to highlight this student artwork in the community. They also talked about in the application about how the artwork in previous years has been used with other community organizations. They identified the YSU Medical Conference, UD's Community Symposium, and the Dayton International Peace Museum's Nonviolence event, which are other great ways to really elevate the student artwork in the community beyond just the contest itself. It also really expands who benefits from seeing this artwork and the thought process of these students as they're continuing to really engage in the suicide prevention work. I felt like the budget was pretty clear with this one, identifying that all $10,000 would be used for design and printing of materials. And the evaluation tool that they provided was fairly extensive. Based on the staff identified and the outline of the project, I believe that the applicant can complete and manage the project on time and with the materials that they had identified in the budget. So I would be interested to hear what some of the other panelists thought.
Thanks, Ariel. I thought you touched on all the highlights that I had as well. I felt that the narrative was strong, detailed, and clear. Clearly, they've been doing, in my opinion, very strong community impact for several years. So it just felt like it was a continuation of that trajectory. I enjoyed that student-focused peer-to-peer component. So building up those relationships and connections and conversations students are having with each other felt like just another layered impact of the project. So I thought that was strong. The budget as well seemed clear to me. I just had one kind of exploratory thoughts, and it really is just because I really gravitated towards this narrative. I thought maybe in years to come, it might be interesting to think about offering some kind of art education components, or maybe sit down workshops or activities where students could come and learn from a professional artist, just to kind of increase their arts learning. Again, that is maybe not focused on their mission and is beyond, of course, the scope of this project, but rather I was energized by their words and thought, oh, here's just another cool idea that could be come forward in years to come. But overall related to what they are proposing for their project. Again, I thought it was strong and well organized.
Yeah, and I just thought it was pretty amazing, even though the prize awards don't come from the grant, that they offer prizes to so many people who both win and participate, because you don't see that very often. So I thought that was pretty great. And then also, as you kind of had already mentioned, I had just put that the application describes how the contest and artwork produced have already had impact on the community. It can have the same effect or better with this latest iteration. So yeah, so it's nice that that work is getting out into the community in other ways and having an effect and impact that way too.
To Ariel's comment, I also noticed that they had a really wide variety of people involved, from art teachers to NAMI to, and other, suicide prevention, Montgomery County. So I think it's a great project to bring a lot of organizations together to support this. And so obviously the community involvement and the community support is there to continue what they've already started in years past.
Any other thoughts? Any final comments? Okay, then with that, that concludes this portion of the meeting. We will break for a little bit, and we will be back in at 12:10 p.m. I have 11:56. So we'll see you here in 14 minutes. Thank you all.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks again for all your hard work.
And I echo those thanks, Rachel, to the panelists, and once again to guests who are attending today. Welcome. And we are right on time. So let's continue. And our next application comes to us from the city of Germantown. Jean is our lead reviewer. Take it away.
Thank you, Sean. So the city of Germantown is requesting $4,000 for a project to create 3 murals on blank building walls to enliven the downtown historic district. This is actually part of an initiative for a revitalization project or plan for downtown Germantown, which has been designated a on the National Register of Historic Places. They very clearly detailed their project timeline for this project. They're going to put out a request for quotes to artists and actually let the business owners choose the art that will go on their building. And then the building owner will be responsible for the supplies. The city of Germantown will pay the artists for their time. They included supporting documents for the personnel from the city of Germantown who will manage this project, but because they don't have any artists identified yet, they didn't include any of that. Let's see, what else did I put to highlight? One of the weaknesses that I thought, and I'm not sure how they would get around this, was in the project evaluation, how they might gauge their success. Is one of their statements was gauging the number of residents or visitors who intently visited downtown to view the murals. And they're going to develop a survey, which I don't believe they included, to ask the participants or the visitors which murals they saw, the location, brief description, and then their opinions. I don't know that that is going to, people might look at it, but not necessarily fill out a survey. So I don't know that that will accurately capture what they're trying to capture with that survey or measure the success. Their budget seemed to be on point. And did I put anything else down as, what I really appreciated was this was actually a planned part of their downtown revitalization, is to create these murals. And I don't think I had any other highlights listed, so I'm happy to open it up to the rest of the panelists for their comments.
Thanks,
Floor is
Jean.
open. Go ahead, Katie.
Yes, I agree with your comments about having this be as an identified section or component of the revitalization plan. So to have all of that research and the people at the table who have already decided these are our goals as a city, as a community, this is how we want to proceed forward, I thought that was really strong. So I think the impetus and the objectives are called for and have really been thought through. I thought that this project's narrative was like the logistics of it felt well planned and had, step by step through the process. I think, maybe perhaps a stronger narrative for me would have maybe seeing an example of the RFQ could have strengthened that area for me just to read it through. Though I say that, I do appreciate that they are doing an RFQ first. So I think from a best practice perspective for public art, engaging quotes and qualifications from artists first, and then narrowing the field down to select finalists to then create a full proposal, again, is a best practice. So I commend them for putting that into place. I think the other strong aspect, and Jean, you mentioned this already, is just the connection with the business owners, right? So to make something successful, I feel like you have to have full engagement from the owners themselves. Of course, public art isn't just to create and install, but it is a maintenance process. It is something that, you know, a community should embrace for decades to come. So to have that buy-in from the get-go from business owners, I thought was a really strong component. Again, I think maybe thinking beyond that and the survey aspect, or how they intend to kind of, you know, draw attention to these murals or educate and promote them going forward. You know, maybe it's a QR code that takes you to a website that has more information about the artist and the process and the inspiration. Maybe also just a community forum board. If you have comments, here's a place for you to mention, these are things you think about it, or this is a design you'd love to see next. These are just kind of, I'm riffing off some programming ideas that might be helpful to put into place. So I thought it was overall a strong narrative.
I would agree. I also thought it was a very strong narrative. The artistic vibrancy of mural work is clearly outlined in the project. The one disconnect for me was related to the budget, where they identify $8,000 for the artist fees, but because they haven't done the RFQ yet and they haven't identified the artist, and $8,000 does not break cleanly between 3 artists, it was not exactly clear to me that they knew that that amount of money was going to pay for the project. So it wasn't like it's $2,000 is what we have to offer per artist, or, you know, and without having done the RFQ, it's not clear to me what happens if it comes back and all of the artists are $5,000 a piece. So just a little more information about how you got to that $8,000 number, because it is 80% of the grant funds being requested. Really tying that back to how it will be used among those artists and distributed across the 3 murals would have been really helpful. But overall, I thought it was a really great application, and I'm excited to see this all happen.
Yeah, I didn't have really anything much to add. I mean, my other comments just really echo what Ariel just said. So, and then I did have a thought as having the business owners involved definitely is a great idea. But then I did think, and I don't remember seeing anything in the application about how that process went as well, though, like which buildings, or you know, is there already some buy off with the owners, especially since they have to, you know, pay, you know, put in some of the money for the supplies, but just kind of how that process went as well. Because, you know, I imagine that there will be owners who are willing and excited about doing this, but just curious about like how that process went as well, of choosing, especially if there were multiple business owners that would want to do that. Since there, you know, there would be limited funds to do that.
Any other thoughts? Final comments? Okay, go ahead and take about 45 seconds to jot down any notes. And moving on, our next application comes to us from Salem Avenue Business Association, and Katie Mark is our lead reviewer. Katie?
Thank you, Sean. Yes, so Salem Avenue Business Association's mission is to promote and unify businesses, neighborhoods, and institutions in the Salem Avenue Peace Corridor area. So with this, the title of their project is B-Wing Sculpture in the Manco Urban Meadow Community Park. They are requesting a funding amount of $10,000. And the project summary is just the construction of the B-Wing sculpture, 12 feet tall, at the corner of Salem Avenue and Rugby Road, which is a focal point of the Manco Urban Meadows Community Park. It is a tribute to pollinators and the harmonious integration of nature in the urban area. So with that, they have already selected a Dayton artist, a local artist and sculptor, Terry Welker, who is well established within the community to create this B-Wing design. Their clear goals are to design, to offer a public art sculpture that will improve the immediate neighborhood through area beautification, community engagement, neighborhood development, and sustainability. Manco Property Services will be the general contractor for the installation of the sculpture. They will have a commemorative plaque, and they've also thought about the solar lighting component, as well as a dedication ceremony. And I believe the sculpture is set to be unveiled at some point this summer of 2024, so this year. They say it'll be an eye-catching feature to add dramatic appeal to both to lure both visitors to stop, explore, sit, and enjoy the peaceful urban meadow. So I felt that this application's strength came from the fact that it's already embedded within this district, this area. So there was a map that was added as a supplemental component, showcasing kind of the width and breadth of this neighborhood and how lots of efforts have been made, I am assuming over decades or years, to revitalize this area. And so of that, there is a community park, and this sculpture will just activate it and accentuate it even more. And I felt that another strength was the artist himself, being local, having a lot of experience with these types of projects, as well as the Manco Property Services. So that general contractor is already solidified and had a support letter that was attached with this application. I thought it was nice that the applicant thought about accessibility already. So thinking about hardscapes in association with the park itself. So trying to engage both that vehicle traffic as well as walkers of all abilities to be able to come into the park and see the artwork. I also felt that a strong component was bringing programming to the park after the public art piece is installed. So I think the intention here is that programming such as farmers markets and other community activities would take place within the park to draw people over, enjoy the park itself, and then of course learn more about the public artwork. So I felt those were strong. The request just specific to the budget components of this applicant, the request or the portion of funding that potentially we would offer to this project would go into the fabrication and install of the sculpture and plaque itself, as well as the solar lighting component and the dedication event. I noted that a lot of the expenses associated with this project are going to be realized through in-kind donation from the Manco company, things like hardscaping, so the sidewalks for this art piece, some marketing invites, and some zoning permits were going to be consumed by that developer themselves. I think it would have been nice from a public art perspective to hear more about kind of how we got to this point. So how the artist himself was selected, the intention. I think the applicant did a good job of writing to the design of the public artwork and how that relates back to the design of the park. But I'm just curious more of that that, you know, the section of planning that happened before this application was submitted. So I'm just questioning, were community members, did they kind of vocalize or call out this artist as somebody they wanted to tap onto? How were community members involved in kind of the selection of that artist and the ultimate design of the artwork? And I'm sure it was, you know, very high quality and you had all those voices at the table, but I think the narrative itself could have been strengthened from knowing more of that context and the background itself. I think, again, as an outsider who doesn't live in this area, perhaps just of interest, it would have been nice to have a deeper description of the neighborhood itself. There was a little bit information about who lives there, but just some more demographics or thinking about the quantity of residents would have been helpful to kind of realize the full picture for me anyway. Overall, though, I feel that it's a strong project. I think that the people who need to bring this project to fruition and to have success are at the table and have committed to the project, which makes sense because I think their timeline is pretty quick turnaround to have the artwork created and installed in 2024. Those are my comments. I'd be interested to hear other panelists' comments.
Yeah, I definitely thought the project had a lot of positives for the community in terms of art and beautification. But the main thing I was going to say is the last point you mentioned is, yeah, getting finished by the end of summer. It sounds extremely ambitious, but I guess there are no real hard milestones or anything that they need to meet. So if it did go past that time, at least before the grant deadlines were met, I guess it would still be okay. But yeah, anytime this summer seems pretty ambitious. And also, I guess another point that you mentioned, I would like to see more public information about public input. And maybe I don't understand exactly. I know it's Manco Urban Meadow Community Park. I don't know if that means it's actually something controlled by the city in any way, but still would like to see more input from the community, especially if it's something that's required. Maybe it's not in this instance, but of course, still very useful to have that public input and what happened before, during, and then afterwards, how much the public, input is going to affect what happens there. Just would like to know a little bit more about that.
My couple comments. I love that they've identified solar for the lighting in the garden. Having sort of a renewable source for the garden, I think really strengthens. A lot of park projects don't have an endowment to support them long term. So implementing a process like that, I think, is important. The only comment I had is the budget has the $1,000 for the dedication. As a evaluator, that's kind of a flag for me when you don't say what that includes, because that's a large amount of money to kind of go unidentified within the grant application. So anytime that parts of the application are very clear, this is the cost of the materials, this is the cost of the fabrication implementation, and then there's just kind of $1,000 for I don't know what. That's always a little confusing for me. So really flushing that out and what that means. Is it hot dogs for the community? Is it a band at a performance in the space? Like what is that money going towards? That would be my only comment.
And the grant will not cover food. So yeah.
Ariel, I had that question also about that because of the restrictions of the grant. And seems to me like I've finally, and I'm looking for it and I can't find it at the moment, of course, that it was for marketing for the event. But yeah, like I said, I can't find it quickly here. So the other comment that I had was about the evaluation, where they talked about they were going to count the number of people who are coming to the park for programming, but then they go on to talk about farmers markets and, you know, using the lending library and people coming to a park, I would think would be a hard thing to count. So I would be interested to know how they were going to accomplish that.
Any final comments or things they'd like to share? Okay, take just one moment to jot down any notes and we will move right along. Our next applicant is the Blue House Arts, and Ed Dixon is our lead reviewer. Ed?
Yeah, so the Blue House Gallery Exhibition Series 2025. Their one sentence project summary is the Blue House Gallery Exhibition Series invites 4 artists or artist teams to 2 local and 2 national to have a solo exhibition and engage with their audience in Northwest Dayton during the exhibition's opening reception, where they talk with audience members about their work and experience as artists. So the Blue House Gallery requests $10,000 to help with this exhibition series to benefit these artists. Each exhibition will also have an educational outreach. So not only are they having the art exhibition, they're going to have separate or educational outreach that coincides with those exhibitions for each of these 4 different exhibitions that they're going to have. The goal of the exhibition series is to expand the artistic knowledge base of local artists and offer educational outreach as well, national networking opportunities for local artists. Bringing visual artists to Dayton allows for cross-pollination of ideas, advancing both the cultural collateral of the area as well as promoting the area and showing our local talents to figures working nationally. So they're doing this in 3 phases. So they're going to have, they've already started planning, which they said they started planning last fall. And these 3 phases are of implementation, are public partnerships, curation and artist relations, and then realizations of the exhibitions. So some of my comments are also that the 3 artists already identified, because the 4th hasn't been identified yet, provide for a unique art experience for the public. The individuals responsible for managing the project have provided their CVs and are well qualified in the field of art, and also creating art exhibitions. The exhibitions provide a place to appreciate artwork for those close by, and its location that is accessible to a large area. There will be a variety of artists and artwork to view, and the gallery is promoting the exhibitions in a large and variety of ways, including direct mail, social media, print media, and radio. There is an evaluation plan in place, and they did attach a sample survey to the application. The budget explains that it's mostly focused on honorariums and for the artists and for the curators. So the artists will get an honorarium for each exhibition, and the curators of the exhibitions will also get one. And that also includes travel and shipping costs, because some of the artists are coming from faraway areas, the national artists. So overall, the personnel involved are well qualified and experienced in providing art exhibitions. 4 plant exhibitions provide an excellent opportunity for the exhibiting artists to share their artwork with the public. It also provides an opportunity for the exhibiting artists and other local artists to network, share, and learn from each other. And those are my comments.
Floor is open.
I thought it was a really strong application. This was another one for me where the budget numbers didn't quite line up. They list the total organizational budget at $4,800, but they're asking for 10,000. So some of that was just a little confusing to me. They did outline clearly where the grant funds would go, but I didn't really have a good understanding of how that fits into their total operations for the organization, and how this would support the organization as a whole. So again, just figuring out how all of the three pieces of the budget sections all work together would have helped me with a little bit of clarity on that part. But the expenses were clear.
I second that, Ariel. I had a similar read as I was going through the budget myself. Some more clarity there would have been helpful. On a positive note, I do like the idea of investing directly into artists and to the incubator itself. So I think that's a very crucial cause. I think I was curious about the numbers of attendance, and just kind of more curious about kind of a breakdown. I think they had a nice promotion and marketing section with some numbers there. But I appreciated, I guess, back to their narrative. I think this organization has kind of gone through some different iterations of where their programming was operating out of, like the space itself. So I think there's kind of a return back to this house component. So I like that they continue to evaluate their programs and kind of make alterations as they go to best support their artists and the viewers and participants that are served by the programming. So I think overall, thought it was a positive, strong application.
I don't have anything else to add that hasn't already been said.
In that case, panelists, if you would go ahead and take a minute or two to go ahead, we will pick things up with our next applicant here in 2 minutes. Okay, just 2 more to go, panelists. So our next one comes to us from the Breast Wishes Foundation, and Jean Love is our lead reviewer. Go ahead, Jean.
Thank you, Sean. The Breast Wishes Foundation is requesting $10,000 to add quality art workshops for their outreach program, where Breast Wishes Foundation wish recipients can create lasting pieces of artwork that they can enjoy making and sharing with their families. It also goes later, the narrative describes being able to connect with other women who have gone through breast cancer and the support part of that project, of that initiative. So they have done art projects, art workshops, sorry, in the past. But they want to add more workshops and maybe diversify their offerings a little bit to include painting, pottery, photography, weaving, poetry, storytelling, or any other art form that would come back on their recipient survey that was highly requested. Says their workshops are well attended and sell out quickly, but sell out is in quotes because they are free to their recipients. But because of where they've been holding them, they have limited space and accessibility issues. So this grant would help them find a different space that would help them address those accessibility issues. They would market it to their email list, social media pages, and website. Again, we talked about how they're going to use the funds. So 60% of the culture work funding for artist fees, 30% on materials, and 10% on venue rental. And one of the things that I would note in the narrative didn't really give us a lot. The application didn't give us very many how do I say this? It was not very detailed in who they would choose. And again, they did say that they're going to survey their recipients to see what the interest was, but they didn't really detail anybody that they have identified, if they're going to do pottery, or if they're going to do photography, or if they're going to do painting. They didn't identify any of those artists or educators that would be willing to come in and do that. They also didn't identify, I don't believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, where they could potentially hold these workshops that would be more accessible. So those were two things that I thought they could have done a little bit better in identifying. The other question that I had was their marketing. While they said that they were going to promote these workshops through their email list, but they were also going to go to Dayton Public Health and Five Rivers Health Clinic and Premier and Kettering hospital networks. But if these are, so it says they hope to connect with more people going through breast cancer treatments, but their initial statement summary was that this was going to be for their wish recipients. So it was unclear to me if it's just for their programs, wish recipients that they already have an established relationship with, or if they're going to open it up to the community. So those are my comments. I welcome comments from the rest of the panelists.
Thank you. My comments were very similar. I think it's a strong application. I love art therapy as a way to help process things that are going on in people's lives. So projects like this, I think, can be really impactful for the communities they serve. But I would just echo kind of Jean's comments. It was a little difficult based on the narrative and the budget provided to really understand what art programs, how many art programs, what the stipends were for the artists, and how it'll be spent across the implementation of a year's worth of workshops. So a little more detail, I think, for me in the how the budget funds would be spent to really ensure that the programs are meeting the needs of the applicants. And I think that's partially a timing issue. I think that the organization is probably just not quite that far along. But in trying to determine whether the funds will be used in the way that we want them to be used, it would have benefited from slightly more information in that area.
I had a similar thought as well. I think it's a well-intentioned grant narrative. I think the proposed project sounds like it's going to have good impact. It's got reasoning and mission and objectives behind it. Again, it's just the clarity aspect. And I think it seems like it's still kind of in the conceptual phase of planning, and not quite to the point where we have a sample curriculum or a sample schedule of workshops, with some clear goals on how many workshops do we want to offer per month, per year, or maybe a goal of participants we want to be there at these workshops. So again, I think it's a really strong idea. I think it's a very worthy cause with seasoned, well-connected administrators. So I think they have a lot of strength behind the programming they're already doing. And because this is new, it feels that it's new. You know, it feels like it's in that more conceptual phase. So a little bit more clarity would have been helpful for me as a reader too.
Yeah, I think the breakout budget also was less broken out than the other budget that's, in the face of the application. So yeah, I think that's just kind of the overall thing too, is that it has a lot of the kind of infrastructure in place, but yeah, there's still some more planning and scheduling that needs to be done. I mean, I did see though that there is a list of artists. I think the director of DSA, if I'm not wrong, has available or said that they can contact, once they decide on the workshops that they want to do. But again, that hasn't been decided yet. So it's kind of hard to know if any of those people on the list will be relevant or not. But as everyone said, overall, the project definitely has quite a bit of merit in the therapeutic nature of it, and the workshops definitely can be successful. It just needs a little bit more application, could use a little bit more of that detail in a few places. So that's it.
Any final thoughts? Okay, panelists, go ahead and take 1 minute, and then we'll get to our final application of the day. And just like that, panelists, we're down to our last one of the day. Can you believe it? Our final application up for review comes to us from the Greater Dayton LGBT Center, and Katie Mark, take her away.
Thank you, Sean. So Greater Dayton LGBT Center strives to offer a comprehensive community-based service organization to the gender and sexual minorities of the Dayton and Miami Valley area by offering event space, activities, and resources. For this project, it's titled Beautifying the Center. They are requesting $10,000 in support, and the center would like, well, they have a new location, and so they would like to offer an outside mural that lets people know we are a safe place that encourages diversity and inclusion. So it's to support the creation and fabrication and installation of a new mural at their new facility. They purchased this building known as the Graphics Terminal on St. Clair Street. They would like to transform 3 large brown painted panels on the exterior of the building into an inclusive and diverse mural celebrating the community that they serve. They are calling for designs in late summer of this year. From there, they will narrow all entries down to 3 choices. Each of those submissions would receive $100 for their efforts. A panel would then choose these designs. Let's see here. We'll select a winning design, rather, is chosen, and that person would receive $1,000 in their efforts. After that point, they would then do a call for artists and artist teams to bid for the opportunity to create the design. That artistic team would be selected. They would receive $7,500 for the work to be completed. And then the artwork is set to be completed in May of next year, in 2025. So, this is another public art project. So I appreciate the intention to beautify that space. And beyond beautification, certainly the project itself mirrors the mission of this organization, right? So all about trying to have more inclusive, welcoming environment. I feel like that is very crucial for the space that they want to create for the people that they serve. So it seems like a well-intentioned, well-timed project at hand. I thought it was interesting. It's a new process I have not seen before about doing a call out to the whole community to offer designs and funneling it from there to have those designs selected to a winning design, and then doing a call to an artist team or professional artist to then actually create the mural itself. So I was unfamiliar with that process, which is fine. I just found it to be interesting. Certainly I could see how this process would interject more community voices into, like, more community voices into the ultimate design of the mural itself, which I thought was strong. I think from there, it would have been helpful, I think, for clarity purposes, just to have more description around their marketing team. So I think they've mentioned social media and flyer to try to get the word out about this project, but maybe a more robust marketing schedule, and information about the demographics that they're trying to reach for the artists that are submitting these proposals. I will note the staff seems like another strong point. Professional, experienced. They will be working with the Mosaic Institute to consult on the project. So that seemed like another strong component. I think for me, what would have been nice to see from a budget standpoint, the budget namely was going to go towards the artist, the designer prize money, the supplies, and some marketing efforts. But what I'm seeing from this budget is that this grant would be the sole funder for this project. So I think from, just from that aspect, having additional supporters, fiscal sponsors for this project would help with its success. I think to have that just to build up those resources to make sure that the project can go into fruition. And it's not just solely responsible for this grant offering to support the project. I think that could have been addressed or presented in a different light to make it stronger. I think too, again, it kind of comes back to this point of we don't have much information about the artists that will be involved or about the fabrication process, just because we're not at that point in the process yet. So perhaps, it might have been interesting to actually see a sample of the RFQ or RFP. I don't believe that was in the support materials. So just more language, I think, more description around these really key steps within the process would have helped to illuminate the process for me, and again, would have helped me to kind of gauge quality. So those are my impressions, strengths, and weaknesses. So I turn it over to the other panelists for comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with much of probably all of what you said, and also, but I just thought the application in general, a lot of the sections were answered, pretty short and sweet. They all supplied information, but definitely didn't go into much detail. So the application definitely could have benefited from going into more detail in a lot of the sections. And then also the bios were provided for, I think, two of the artists that would be involved, or at least that they mentioned. But the executive director, who would be the key contact, his information or qualifications were not listed. So that would have been helpful as well.
I would agree with the comments that have been made. I think that the project is probably at the very beginning inception stages. And that's really reflected in some of the very concise language, I think, that's in the application. I would agree that there were some pieces that are missing for me in understanding the why it's necessary, the who it impacts, and really understanding if the budget document, where those numbers came from, because we're not at the point of really bidding the project yet. So is $7,500 adequate? I don't know. And there wasn't a lot of detail behind that to give me the confidence that the budget was thought out in a way with the backup documentation to really support those numbers in the document. So I love mural projects, and I'm excited to see something like this happen downtown. But I did feel like there were a couple of places, as Katie outlined pretty articulately, that would have made me feel stronger about where this project was in the completion process.
Jean, anything to add?
I would echo some of Ariel's thoughts, and we kind of discussed it with the Germantown murals, I believe, where they're allocating funds without really knowing how much it's going to cost. And particularly in this case, when they're going out to the community to ask for design ideas, that could be a little bit even more of an unknown. Could an artist, come make that design come to life with the amount of money that they're being offered? Another, and just kind of to echo everybody else's, that there was room for improvement on this narrative. Like, I didn't see any criteria for measuring the project impact. And again, we couldn't end without me talking about the budget again, right? They actually earmarked $1,300 of this $10,000 for prize money, and that is restricted. One of the restrictions in the grant guide that I highlighted, along with food. So that would be something that we would not be able to grant to them. And the other comment that I had was there was no plan detailed on how to make the call for the artists. I'm assuming they're just going to put the, put the winning designs out there and ask for, and to make it very simple language, who wants to do this and how much would it cost us? How much would you charge us to do it? But again, there were a lot of details I think that they could have would have helped. They could have included to improve on their application.
Yeah, I think going off that, I had another question. And Jean, you prompted me to think about it, was I'm not sure there was information about who sits on the selection panel itself. So that could have been interesting too. How many people, who are those people? And I don't believe it was embedded within the narrative. So that's maybe another component that would have made the narrative stronger.
Any final thoughts? Okay. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of the review process at this point. And Rachel, I'll ask you to chime in. We will be taking a break, and we are convening back here, but staying in this room, correct, Rachel?
Yes. The public will not be allowed back into the session. However, our panelists will be reconvening in about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how long you all would like to take your break. I'll just be in here and I'll see you when you get here. All right. With the spreadsheet. For the applicants who are still in the room, please remember that you will be notified of the final rankings and funding recommendations by email within 7 days on Thursday, June 27th. And the grant panel's funding recommendations are subject to final review and approval by MCACD, the Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District Board. In July, you will receive notification of your final funding status again by email. CultureWorks staff will then schedule a meeting with each of you selected for funding to review and complete a grant contract. And so if there are any contingency plans, for example, you ask for money for food, those will all be addressed in that grant contract. And that is what we have. So thank you everyone for being here today. We really appreciate your time. And at this point, I'm going to invite all of the applicants in the room to please leave and stop our recording.